Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a split decision in Venezuela.
They wanted to participate in what they said was the biggest demonstration of democracy so far in the past 10 years for them.
Both sides claimed victory in a contested presidential election. But would President Nicolas Maduro ever accept defeat? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. After 2 terms and 11 years in power, the Venezuelan president faced his toughest contest yet.
His challenger is Edmundo Gonzalez, a 74-year-old former diplomat who has attracted significant support, drawing crowds of thousands.
Polls show him trailing challenger Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia by a large margin. Gonzalez was an obscure retired diplomat with no political aspirations until a coalition of opposition parties picked him as its candidate.
According to some polls, Gonzalez was taking the lead and set to win. But then,
President Nicolas Maduro has been declared the winner of Sunday's election. That's according to the country's National Electoral Council. Maduro suggests
Immediately when that happened, around the area from where I was covering this news, just chanting erupted, yelling, screams, saying, "It's not true, that didn't happen."
Ana Herrero is a journalist based in Caracas, Venezuela. We spoke to her early the next morning on only a few hours of sleep, and she told us her election day story, one she experienced as both a journalist and as a voter. It's a day she won't soon forget.
I started covering the day at 6 a.m. and started as usual. People rushing to vote. Things moved very fast.
Ana was at an election center located in an area that's a traditional Maduro stronghold.
A voting center called Liceo Andrés Bello. And it is a very big school with over 14,000 voters.
As the day went on, the day started to get more and more tense. She started to hear reporting about irregularities.
We received information that witnesses were not being allowed inside of the voting centers and that people started making long lines to exercise their will and their right to vote. But then when the table started closing at 6 p.m., where the problems began.
People noticed that the opposition witnesses, who are legally allowed to observe the voting, were being barred from the building.
People started gathering, and they were chanting the national anthem. They were chanting to let them in. They wanted to count the votes. They wanted to participate in what they said was the biggest demonstration of democracy so far in the past 10 years for them. And all of a sudden, around 150 bikes start to appear in front of the electoral center. Some dressed in red, which is the government's color, some dressed in black. We witnessed how some of these people on motorcycles, they jumped out of the motorcycle and started to walk toward this group of 50, maybe. And just very threatening, and it became pandemonium, just total chaos. This group then started punching another guy. Another elderly man tried to approach, and he was hit, and with a gun, a guy took a gun, and with the back of the gun, he hit the guy in the head. The guy immediately started bleeding. They were pushed. Me, myself, got in the middle of that and received several hits. And well, my equipment was just basically destroyed. My phone was safe.
Despite the violence, despite the chaos, the people stood up and wouldn't leave.
They took over the entrance. I've never seen this group of citizens, women, elderly women, young men, stayed there. They started chanting again the national anthem. They started chanting that they wanted to count the votes, and they started calling more people and people from around the buildings. They approached and made sure that they were together. And it was a very, very tense situation. I've witnessed how violence can just spread quickly in this kind of situations, but how the people stayed there, that was unbelievable for me.
So, Anna, this is just an extraordinary story you're telling us. I mean, is this business as usual voting day in Venezuela, or is this something truly remarkable?
It's truly remarkable because of the context. The fact that after so many years of demonstrations against the government, hundreds of deaths, thousands of arrests, hundreds of political prisoners, millions leaving the country, and now more than ever, they stayed to count each and every vote. And I found that extraordinary.
Anna, can we just pull the lens back a little bit? In terms of the big question that most people listening to this want to know is who won the election? And unfortunately, the answer is, well, it depends on who you ask, right? Can you tell us what both sides are saying about the results of this election? Maybe you can even start with the official results that have come in from the government.
Yes, of course. After midnight, just past midnight, the head of the Electoral Council announced that Nicolas Maduro had won the elections with over 51% of the votes. Around 20 minutes after that, the opposition spoke. The first one to do so was the face of the electoral campaign behind Edmundo Gonzalez, Maria Corina Machado. She was supposed to be the main candidate, but then the government banned her from running.
He was almost an unknown when he became the opposition alliance's last-minute candidate after Maria Corina Machado, the winner of its October primary, was barred from public office over alleged fraud, which she denies. She has backed Gonzalez and has appeared at his side at several stops on the campaign trail.
She spoke first and said that according to the numbers that not only they have, but that they can prove, Edmundo Gonzalez won with 70% of the votes.
Wow.
So, of course, this is absolutely different one from the other. But at the same time, the government had Maduro dancing and thanking everyone for another 6 years in office in what he promised would be a time to recover the democracy.
Y puedo decir ante el pueblo de Venezuela y ante el mundo.
So one side claims victory with 51%, the other claims victory with 70%. The president is on television dancing and says, I won. The other side is saying, actually, we won. So people might not trust Maduro to run a fair election, right? But because of how the voting is done in Venezuela, it theoretically should be pretty obvious to identify outright fraud. Tell me about how the voting is done in Venezuela and why the opposition felt that it had a chance to overcome all the many, many obstacles the government threw at them.
That's actually the best way to describe it because it's very confusing. So yes, the voting system, it's almost flawless. The voting itself. So when you get inside of a voting station, a voting center, you activate a little machine. This is all automatized. And you activate this machine with your fingerprint. You get into the machine in front of it. No one has to be around you, of course. And then you push the button for your candidate. The face of the candidate will appear huge on the screen. And then you push again. So you have two opportunities to vote for your candidate, for the one you elected. And then the machine gives you this little receipt with the name. And that receipt is put into this box. And then you sign, and that's it. That's very quickly. I did so in maybe 45 seconds, even less. So here's the interesting part. It is not the voting itself. Actually, the opposition is saying that they have the votes, that they can count how many people clicked on Edmundo Gonzalez's face to vote for him. It is not that those votes don't exist or that the government is just twisting those votes. That is not the problem. The problem is that after everything happens, at 6 p.m., the voting centers close. And the witnesses, they have to stay there with the actual members of the voting table to count the votes. The machine is going to print what we call here actas. It's a certificate of how many people voted and who won on that table. If the witnesses don't have this receipt, this certification of how many people voted and who won, they can't say, yes, what you are saying, it's true. So from the beginning, the witnesses from Edmundo Gonzalez, who were supposed to be there to count the votes, they weren't allowed into many centers. But now what they're asking is the government should show the rest of this confirmation receipts, if you will, to tell the world who really won.
Yeah.
And that is something that we don't know if the government is going to comply or not.
How has the world reacted to this Maduro victory? That's after the break. Anna, look, the international community is taking note. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already congratulated Maduro on his victory, whereas the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has commented, "We have serious concerns that the results announced does not reflect the will or the votes of the Venezuelan people." Here's my question. Is there anything that can be done to unseat Maduro, even if the evidence is overwhelming that he actually lost this election?
Well, the opposition is very clear and was very clear yesterday. Something that just, a quick note, it's also very important to say that the opposition didn't immediately call people to the streets to protest. They are very confident that they won, and they want to show the world, vote by vote, who won and what they're asking from the government. They want to sit down and they want to count the votes, and they want to make sure that their witnesses have the actas, these ballots, and then they want to compare the numbers and just have a fully reviewed process. But even so, it is not Maduro's choice. It's the law.
Okay, well, it sounds like if the opposition truly did win the election, Maduro is going to be faced with a choice, whether or not to uphold the law and lose power or ignore the law and keep power.
It is definitely a political decision. This is something that many analysts and people inside the opposition and the government have said. I've had good conversations with many sides and many people with strong links to both sides. And they all said the same thing. This is going to be a political decision, not an electoral one.
There was so much hope leading up to this election. There was a unified opposition. They say a divided opposition is the autocrat's best friend. And this decision to bar Machado from the ticket really did seem to energize and organize the opposition in ways that I think probably took Maduro by surprise. But now waking up and seeing what's happened, I mean, what happens to all that hope? How are people feeling?
People yesterday, I can't say for sure because I haven't spoken to that many on the streets. But generally, social media, which is here for the opposition, you could see how things are going through social media. But there, people were just waiting. But this is something that many were expecting. Many. The actual problem, what you discussed weeks ago, the result of the elections or the outcome of the elections, the problem wasn't what is Maduro going to win. Many people projected that he didn't have the votes. He doesn't have the support that he needs to keep another 6 years in office. The problem was not the math. The problem was, is he going to concede or not? And given, that to be the issue says a lot of how this government reacts and acts and what is happening right now.
What will you be looking out for in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, first, the response of the Electoral Council on whether the opposition is going to be allowed to count or not. And then the reaction of the international community, for sure. Many countries have said that they are not willing to recognize a new government of Nicolas Maduro unless they are certain that all the votes were being counted, whether this could be qualified as a fair and clean election or not.
This is a country that's been through so much pain over the past few decades, economic pain. You've seen, some say 8 million Venezuelans leave. I wonder what it was like for you just as a Venezuelan to be there and watching your fellow citizens fight for democracy, both physically and I guess, spiritually.
I've been covering this country for the past 15 years. I've seen it all. But this is the first time that I see everyone uniting around one strong feeling of we can't handle any more of this. It is not a question of socialism. Is socialism better? Is capitalism better? This is not the issue now. It is just a matter of if we continue down this path, we're not going to survive. Yesterday, I saw something completely different. I saw families gathered. I saw young children, 4 or 5 years old, in the streets, voting with their parents, and knowing we need either to leave or to die here trying.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Khaled Soltan and Chloe K. Lee, with Duha Mosaad, Manahil Naveed, Veronique Eshaya, and me, Kevin Hirten, in for Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer. And Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.